question's actually directed to you, Josh. I want to know a little bit more about the specifics of the audio implementation tools you're talking about.
It's very specific. Like, as far as platform goes, I've only programmed for Windows, to be honest. Specifically, I used, there's an open source, not in the Multimedia Fusion, I couldn't do this, but for the mod implementation, there was this audio library called Dumb, for whatever reason, and that's what I implemented. I just fed it into direct sound. I bought a few books, researched, did the appropriate things to do that, and I don't know, that seems like, you could talk to me later about that maybe, it's pretty specific. Any other questions?
So is a lot of your stuff more like sample-based, or do you also do a lot of just handwritten scores and then put that into sampling?
I think I'm actually one of the more rare composers in that I use both trackers. I use Renoise sometimes, which I can combine samples and VSTs, but I also, I'm classically trained. I love having live performers, so all the time I'm scoring things out and writing it and trying to hopefully have people play it for me and get it recorded. And I mean, I know that's a tool that unfortunately you can see like composer farms, like Hans Zimmer has a case of this where like,
he keeps people in cages.
Yeah, well, he'll like play a melody pretty much, and I've seen a video of this. He plays a melody and he maybe like writes out the melody, but all the hardcore orchestration, the parts that the players do, that's all somebody else. He doesn't do that much work as like the hard shit work that composers have to do.
And yeah, it's a really good point. Also, that having live musicians, even if you normally just sequence everything and you just use trackers and you don't think about using live parts. This came up at another panel, but live stuff is really important. It doesn't have to be expensive. Like just offhand the audience, I know, for example, Jill in back, Jill Aversa, my wife. So if you have any composers here, for example, she does vocals for games. She was just on God of War. Brad, over there on the right, plays sax and clarinet. These are just like people in the video game music community. And you just email them and you say, hey, I'm working on this project. I don't have much money, but let's work something out. I'm sure that they would definitely work with you. For example, you don't need to be, calling up people in Los Angeles, to get something good. And you've worked with, live performers all the time.
Yep, guitars, violins, singers. My friend is a really good singer. He's actually not in here, but he's actually on an OCR project, and he blew it out of the water. And it's so helpful to have the skills to write music out. I mean, if I didn't have that skill, I think I'd be a shitty musician. But that's only a testament to the talent of those who can do it without knowing that stuff.
Actually, there was somebody who did a guitar cover of the Hell music from Super Meat Boy online, and I hired him to do guitar for the Rock Band tracks that I'm doing. And he lives in France.
That means you should remix and arrange all our shit.
Yeah.
Remixing is good. And then submit them to Overclock Remix.
And this is the guy who did all the piano covers.
Huh?
The guy who did all the piano covers and posted them to YouTube. That was
Any other questions?
Questions? Yeah, there's one back there.
Yeah, what's the hardest thing about doing collaborative music other than just writing your own?
Where's Jimmy? You should answer that question.
Wait, what now?
Collaborative music as opposed to writing your own.
What's the hardest thing about it?
Jimmy, by the way,
Who
works
is
on
Jimmy?
Mass Effect too. Yeah. He works with Jack Wall. And
He's not indie enough to be up here.
He's not really. But that's a great question. This is why we're all friends.
God, I think the biggest problem is knowing when to like lead and when to follow, because there's times when like you have an awesome idea and they have an awesome idea, and sometimes it can become a clash of like whose idea is more awesome. And I don't know, occasionally it's theirs and sometimes it's yours, and so I don't know, you have to make sure that you're complementing their work and not competing against it.
You can also try, when you collaborate, I've definitely worked with other musicians before actually on the writing part and producing. I don't know if you guys have done this, but just actually taking like a project file and waves and just literally like, okay, I'm done with my part, here, you take it, write some more stuff and send it back. And sometimes that's very like straightforward enough. You can't do that maybe for like a whole 60-minute soundtrack, but for like short stuff, it's great.
Another way you can do it is you can like split up the game so that one composer takes like half the tracks and the other takes another half, and then you've got another problem. How are you gonna make like a cohesive soundtrack with like one cohesive sound if you're two composers doing one half each? That's another problem that you're gonna have to deal with, but it's possible, it's doable. I mean, and for example, one could do like battle tracks, like hardcore techno pumping battle tracks, and the other can do like more ambient field tracks. Yeah. So you're gonna.
Do bass line.
That's totally rip-off. I've never done anything like that, by the way.
I don't do a lot of collaboration just because it's a pain in the ass.
It doesn't work well with others.
I don't. I just, because I'm like really particular in the way I write. What did I suck?
No, other people suck.
I was going the other way with that one. I would usually do it, I guess his way. It's like, I think when you do have multiple composers on a track and it's not in a composer farm kind of way where it's just like other people doing the work for somebody else, it's really cool to be able to say, okay, this person seems to be better or enjoys more writing action pieces, and you have one person do the more emotional ambient stuff and the other person do like the battle stuff, because then what that does is as long as you coordinate and have it be cohesive, you get different perspectives and different feel from different composers, because like one person can only have such a wide swath of ability, whereas if you split it up, it's pretty interesting. So,
I think somebody in the back in the white shirt. Did you have a question? Yeah.
I was wondering, because I have been working on a musical that's based on a video game, and I was wondering to what degree are the skills similar to compose for video games and to compose for musical theater?
I'm actually.
Let me think.
I think Josh is probably most qualified to this.
I'm actually working on an opera right now. I think David's probably pretty qualified too. That's a cool question, actually, because I think that's very neat.
Just rip off the Final Fantasy VI opera scene.
Yeah, there you go.
Every track.
You're gonna do it. Yeah, that's how you do it. I don't know. Taking classical composition lessons and studying and learning all this avant-garde shit that I'm never going to put in a video game. I have found myself starting to do some weird stuff in my music, and I don't know. The skills like for writing for voice, like it's very good to know how to work with live performers, like we already said. Knowing the range of singers for the musical would be good. I mean, I don't know, you can ask me that later, maybe. It seems pretty specific as well. We can get a room, guys.
They're pretty much different beasts, though. I mean, you have to take different things in consideration, because I mean, with video games, even if you're doing like AAA stuff and you've got orchestras and you've got rock bands or God knows what, I mean, it's a different kind of narrative, basically. I mean, if you're doing in-game music or like cinematic music, well, cinematic music's possibly closer, but I mean, when you're doing musical theater, as Josh said, you've got the vocals to think about, and how is the instrumental music going to complement and work together with the vocal music to let the singers and the vocals step through. It's hard to compare them, basically.
It is. I rearranged one of the songs or pieces that I wrote for Gun Girl 2, and I had it performed live, and I mean, this is also a thing about being a student too, and always learning. It's just, the levels were very strange because you have to be very sensitive with dynamics and that sort of thing. And if you write for a live performer in your game music, it's very important to take all those things into consideration. If you hand a part to a player and you don't have any dynamics on it, they immediately will stop taking you seriously. That's just good to know, I think. Any other questions? Yeah.
So on that kind of front, do you guys get frustrated with the expectations of the video game community expecting you to write music that they expect you to write? In other words, for example, there's no way that you would ever write music for musical theater for a video game. There's a lot of expectations there. The scheme is in the sense of what's come before you. Like a lot of the songs that we heard, pieces that we heard today, are very reminiscent of the old Mega Mans and a lot of the chip tunes and stuff. Do you guys get frustrated with the fact that you actually can't broaden the box a little bit more with some of the independent music?
Well, I don't know about like frustration. I think one thing that was really strange to me was that, so I did the Super Meat Boy soundtrack and it's all retro or whatever. I did not, even though people called the Cannonball soundtrack chiptune, which doesn't make any fucking sense. And like, I understand why people call Super Meat Boy soundtrack chiptune. I get that. It's, I don't want to say lowest common denominator because it's kind of like a negative connotation, but everybody as a whole, this giant mass of people that is gamers, perceive things in a certain way, and they hear something that's like kind of electronic and very melodic, and they remember, oh, it's like old school chiptunes, whatever. What puzzled me, I guess, was that most of the, like, I think the last 4 or 5 tracks on Super Meat Boy are entirely orchestral. Stop it. He's showing me Cannonball stuff, kidding me.
Game over screen.
Yeah. Like, are you telling me I just failed? Like, but
He ran into a wall and fell.
anyway, it was strange to me that like the last 5 tracks or whatever are completely orchestral, like no whatever, you know, choir and all that kind of stuff, and people still call it a chiptune soundtrack. And I mean, it kind of goes to what you're saying is that people do have these expectations, and like when I read reviews that say it's a chiptune soundtrack, I wonder if they played through the whole game, because like it's like in your fucking face, melodramatic. I'm a choir, blah blah blah, just all over the place, and it's like if people can get through all, and then like the ending theme is solid electric guitar the whole time through, and the main theme is electric guitar, and there's a recorded electric guitar in all these tracks, and it's just it really kind of puzzles me how people can hear that and just call it chiptune. I think people don't think about it very much, and maybe that's why, and that's fine, because like they shouldn't have to. That's my job. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I said it anyway.
Maybe in this case they just like misuse the label chiptune for like calling anything that sounds retro, calling it chiptune.
I call it retro inspired.
Well, because even the orchestral stuff, it's like when you listen to orchestral stuff in like in like a Mass Effect 2 or like a AAA game, it's like fuck that game. It's like it's very film inspired, whereas like my orchestral stuff, I would say in Meat Boy is still game inspired. You know, because like a lot of the stuff in Final Fantasy games in Super Nintendo was orchestral, but it's still game music. So like, you know, like the Chapter 5 stuff and the end stuff in Super Meat Boy, like even though I was restricting myself, another example of restricting yourself to try to do something, because my roots are more in orchestral stuff, but still composing in a way that like you could turn it into a chiptune and it would still sound good.
Yeah, if I can just, one more thing.
Sure.
It just seems to me like, for example, with the Super Nintendo era, those composers, they had those limitations and there was nothing else that they could do about it, and so they tried to push the boundaries as much as possible. This time period, you know, when we're all writing music now, it's kind of like the sky's the limit to an extent, and so, you know, what gives you that opportunity to either say, okay, no, I'm going to give myself these limitations because I liked what came before and it's what I grew up with, and that type of aspect, as opposed to, you know, doing the sky's the limit and taking more, you know, building different sounds.
I think part of it, honestly, is the community. I mean, we're addressing indie games here. Part of it is that these people are, I mean, these games are a little more carefree. They're not always super cinematic, and that's not to say that there aren't indie games that are like that, because there most certainly are. They're wonderful. Braid being an example, Aquaria being another example, but a lot of the people that I've written for, they're making more casual games. I mean, they're not expecting to have like a film score budget or anything, obviously, so I mean, I think that really speaks to that issue. We're actually kind of running out a little bit out of time. We started late though, so I'm not.
Is there anyone after us?
There's no one after you guys.
All right, party on, yeah. And that's one more thing I wanted to say about your question in regards to the things that we've been playing being more retro sounding is that he's pointing at the title of End Harder. Is that what you?
Well, I just thought you brought that up because
I did. That's why I selected there.